to begin.
What's up, everybody? You're listening to KQBHLP, Los Angeles, California, 101.5 FM, a community service of the Boyle Heights Arts Conservatory, broadcasting live on your FM dial and streaming on KQBHLA.com. You're listening to the Social Primate with your host, Eddie Aguirre. And today we have the one and only La Tía de Cela, Xitlalic Guijosa-Osuna. Thank you so much for making the time to come out here.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. Finally, we get to do this.
I know. I mean, just for the people out there, we've been planning this for a couple of months, but we were just mentioning off there between everything going on, getting sick, like it's been chaotic, but todo su tiempo.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much again for making the time to come out here. Again, I've been wanting to have you on the show for a while because there's been a few events over the last couple of years where I've had the opportunity to share space with you as well. And through, I want to say it's Tarjetitas de Amor, right?
Con Amor.
Con Amor, there you go. Tell me a little bit about that project.
So that one started almost, I want to say 12 years ago, maybe 14 years ago. It started as a fundraiser because my friend and I would do poetry events here in Boyle Heights and Xitlalic. And in order to pay some of the poets, we had to fundraise. So we started making postcards. And then I started creating cards and people started liking them. And I was like, okay. And the funny thing that would happen was that I wanted to make prints. I really, really wanted to be a printer. And people wouldn't buy my prints, but they would buy my cards and frame them. And I was like, okay, I see what y'all want. And so I also couldn't find cards that were, that spoke to us. You know, that were either super religious, super corny. It had like a piñata, like a burrito piñata, where it had like the Virgen or like God's hands. I don't know. And I was like, I don't even go to church. I can't give this to my mom. So I started creating cards that I know my mom would love and that also would remind others of their parents in the language that they used. So that's how I started. And then it just kind of took a life of its own.
Yeah. And so at this point, it's been how many years now?
Well, it's been over a decade. You know, I still can't believe it's been over a decade. I'm like, I'm still doing it, which is awesome. You know, it allows me to challenge myself creatively, but it's been over a decade. It's been awesome.
And now the last time that I got to see you, at least in front of a crowd, was at, I believe, your open mic. You were reciting some poetry.
Yeah.
And tell me a little bit about that history. Like, was that before you started the the project with the Tarjetitas con Amor?
So that was after I started Tarjetitas con Amor. Because Tarjetitas con Amor was like kind of it was sort of a joke, like an inside joke for myself with me. Because I would get invited to events and they're like, we need a name for your business. And I was like, what? I'm just selling stuff. Yeah. And I was like, Tarjetitas con Amor, this is not going to stick. And it stayed. And then I met Eric. And I gravitated towards Eric because we're the same mix. His parents are from Sinaloa and Michoacan. And so are my parents. And I was like, primo. And so we started working together. I asked him if I could come through, you know. He said, like, yeah, for sure. And then things shifted at Alivio. And then I came in and we started to invite poets that we knew, that we met in the open mic circles. Because I used to co-host with my friend Bus Stop at Corazón del Pueblo, which was in Boyle Heights on First Street. And it was called Flowers of Fire. And a lot of poets came out of there. A lot of poets it became like their first open mic or their first scene. And that's also where I met Eric. So Eric would go and then he started to say that he was going to do an open mic in the city of Bell. Because there were so much things going on in Bell, right? In Southeast LA. And we didn't have anything like that in Southeast LA. So when he said he was going to start it, I was like, dude, I'll be there. I'll support you. And then I became part of it.
I mentioned it before. Like, I think it's Alivio is one of those platforms, those little hubs. I think early on when I first became aware of Alivio, I think it was maybe 2016 or something. So I think at this point, they've already celebrated their 10 years.
Yeah, because it was after 2012, you know, that whole crazy stuff. And I was just starting to make my cards and whatnot. And I had gone to Texas. I came back, and that's when he started the open mic. And ¿cómo se llama? Yeah, so this year we celebrated last year we celebrated our 10th year. And I was like, I think we should, like, this should be our last one. He's like, no. And I was like, okay, well, it's going to be my last one.
Yeah, I remember that.
Just because I'm so tired. I'm not, I'm not ¿cómo dicen? A spring chicken.
Yeah.
So I was like, I also wanted to do different things, but also we're just both very tired. But with everything that's happening, I don't think Olivia is going to end anytime soon. I think it's going to continue on. It might not be what it was before, but it's still a space that people want to continue to happen, especially in Southeast LA.
Yeah. And how do you see yourself right now with the stuff that's going on politically and abroad?
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you feel like it's affecting you or giving you more like fire in this case to kind of pinpoint specific things? Or
for me, it's been really difficult because there's a lot of worry on my side, right? I think about my family and I think about my friends, and that's what's occupying my mind right now. But I also feel like the way my work has shifted recently has been that I've gotten to show people how to do the work that I do, right? So doing workshops, whether it was in writing or carving, printing, that's what I've been able to do. And then they could create the art that they want to, because there's so many people that want to do something and they don't know how to contribute. So art is the way to contribute to stuff that's happening right now, right? To bring awareness to it. Yeah. And I think printing is an awesome way of doing that, and also writing, right? So I think being able to teach people how to do it or guide them through it has been my contribution.
Yeah.
Right.
And, one of those things that I can kind of relate to is time, or even nowadays, like when people ask me to, say a story or something about myself, like I find it really hard to pinpoint specific things that I feel like they're worthy of telling. So I think that can extend to a greater part of a community as well, where, we're not necessarily used to expressing ourselves in certain ways that it feels like our stuff isn't important. But when you really, get to the point where, let's say you see you vending somewhere and you see a message on this card that just kind of hits you like a dicho, or like something that just focuses on like the cultural nuances of yourself, you're like, wait, what? Like, I feel heard. Like I know what this is, And I think that gives you a better sense of representation and confidence.
Mm-hmm. I think that's been my favorite part about creating the cards, is how people connect to it. And they're like, oh, my abuela used to say this, or my mom says this, or my tia, And that's why I get the inspiration from. And also just people that I've met over the years, because they're like, what you should do is make a card that says X, Y, and Z. And so I take it, I take it because these are ideas that people offer, right? Yeah. But I love that the work that with the cards, especially with the cards, I love that they connect with them, and people are like, dude, these cards are great. And I still can't believe that people think that, but I'm happy that I'm able to provide that, and that the community continues to be an inspiration to them. So.
And now, what inspires? I know you mentioned your family, just stuff that you witnessed growing up. Like, how did that become a thing of expression for you?
I'm the youngest of three. Well, I'm the youngest, one of the youngest of five, but I grew up with my two older brothers. And when you're younger and you have a huge age gap, it's like, be quiet, no digas nada, cállate, stop being annoying. And so I was holding in a lot of stuff. So I realized that writing was a lot of help, and art was a lot of help. And it brought me so much peace, and it let me kind of just let out and say what I couldn't say out loud. And I think in Latino communities or Mexican American communities or Mexican communities, and I speak on that because I'm Mexican, we tend to like not allow ourselves to express ourselves in certain ways, to be emotional, like deja de llorar, and not being able to do any of that stuff. And writing allowed me to do that, right, without really saying it out loud. And then later I was able to share it, and I realized that people were connecting with it. They're like, oh, man, I went through that. Oh, I'm going through that right now. Oh, my sister used to say stuff like that, or my mom went through that, or even parents are like, when I was younger, I went through something like that. So, como se dice, I feel like that's where I made my connection, right? That's how I decided, okay, I'm going to use this tool to be able to express myself.
Yeah.
Right. So it's been helpful. It's been amazing. And now I get to do workshops about it, and I get to teach about it, and I also get to present about it. So
yeah, like how you mentioned, like use it as a tool, right? Because at the end of the day, lessons or things that just come towards us, we decide how we use them, you know, or apply them to our life. And one of the things that I learned early on or later on was that art, right, is an expression of to create. But at the end of the day, we get the definition a little like muddied up because we think that art has to be painting or something like that, you know? Yeah. But it's an expression. You're creating, you know, you can be building something from scratch. Like that's the essence of it.
Yeah.
But, you know, you realize that you need to have these balances within yourself, right? You got to release these energies and create it into something else in order for it to kind of get it off your chest.
Exactly. I think that, you know, working with students, I've noticed that sometimes they find it hard, or they're like, oh, I can't write something like that, or it's not going to rhyme. I'm like, it doesn't have to rhyme. We're just telling a story. And then when we show them like that there's music, like rap, you know, like hip hop, it's all storytelling. And then when I include, you know, depending on the demographic, right, I'll bring up Chalino, or I'll bring up corridos, you know, and like, well, these are stories that are being told about the places that we're from. All the songs are. And so when they make that connection, they're like, oh, yeah. You know, it's just in a different structure. And then, you know, we do different workshops with them on how to tell stories and how to use their imagination as well. Because I think that's something that we lack after a certain time.
Yeah.
Because we're worried so much that we stop imagining and using our imagination, you know. And I think it's, you know, my friend Bus Stop always says, you know, like if it wasn't for imagination, we wouldn't be where we are right now. Our ancestors imagined the world. You know, they imagined a chair, they imagined a table in schools. And that's why we're at right now. And I think that's a beautiful, beautiful way of seeing it. And when the kids, you know, when the students get to hear that, then they start to use their imagination.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, back in high school, I remember I had this teacher, rest in peace, Paulino Fontes. But basically, he was my English teacher. And I remember at some point he was showing us a curriculum and he was giving us all these like American poets. You know, of course, Robert Frost is always there. And stories that I never in 100 years can relate to, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then one day he came out and he brought, who was it? He brought some literature out from, what's his name? Gabriel Garcia Marquez, I think.
Yeah.
And he started showing us, you know, and like, I had a mind-blown moment here, you know? And I started realizing, like, wait a second, like, why haven't I been exposed to this? Like, this is something I've related to, you know? Or just any other writing outside of just the English, you know, that we know there's a lot of powerful things coming out of that.
Yeah, you know, I was actually thinking about that today because I remember reading The House on Mango Street when I was in high school.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
But before that book, I read Chicana Falsa by Michelle Cerros. Mm-hmm. And she came over to our school in Huntington Park, Nimitz Middle School, or junior high back in the day. And she came in, she shared her poetry, and she mentioned Oxnard.
Mm-hmm.
And my family works in the city of Oxnard, right at the swap meets. And I was like, Oxnard, somebody else is saying that word?
Yeah.
Nobody knows where Oxnard is. And she's coming, you know, to our school in Southeast LA talking about Oxnard. And being Chicana Falsa, you know, being dubbed that, right, by her friend, and identity, right? And I was like, dude, I can totally relate to this. Mm-hmm. And I think now, one of the things that I try to do is introduce poetry that our students can see themselves in.
Yeah, right.
You know, because, you know, I was exposed to Robert Frost, to Edgar Allan Poe, to all these amazing poets, and they're great. But they weren't us. That's not our stories. So it's important to share with our students, and we make it a thing where we make sure our students understand that there is poetry within above them.
Yeah. So. You know, I think another key thing to that is, especially now, is I think it's important for us to be exposed to these stories of the contrast is the narrative that we see right now that dehumanizes immigrants and people of specific color, you know? Mm-hmm. Like, in order for us to fight that, I think we have to focus on the stories that do show a light on the good things about the culture, right?
Yeah.
And rather than, again, focusing on the negative stuff, because like that, we're never going to get out of the boxes that we've been placed into.
Yeah.
And, you know, if we don't allow ourselves the time to celebrate the little things, like, you know, that's not going to take us anywhere at the end.
Yeah. I think one of my favorite types of poetry that I've gotten to hear is like the stuff with the dichos, because it's something I feel like we've lost over time, but are bringing back little by little. But also, touching base with our lineage, right? Where our families come from. So we encourage folks, we encourage students. I encourage folks that come to the workshops to really talk about their lineage, what inspired them. For me, what inspires my poetry a lot of the times is food. I think mole is very poetic because it's such a process, and I think chile rellenos are poetic, and I think pozole is poetic too. And I think a really awesome example is like water for chocolate,
Yeah.
So now there's like a whole series and everybody's being reintroduced to that. So I think that, for us, food is part of our culture, obviously. And food is part of every culture, right? But how we tap into it and why it's important for us to continue these traditions, but also write about them, documenting them, attaching a story to it, right? And we get to do this with our students, and they talk about like the salsas that their grandmas make, the pozole that, their family makes. And then I always ask them like, chile verde or rojo? And they're like, verde. And I'm like, yeah. Yeah, you know what? The kids want what they want. But yeah.
Yeah, it's through this work that you've done, both through the poetry and the the cards that you've done. Do you think like you've I don't know, have you had the moment where you feel like you have a responsibility to document these things? I mean, because you're already documenting it, but you're also taking the wisdom of those before us, our elders, right? And you're basically helping them document what is going on now. Like how does that make you feel?
At first I was just doing it because I wanted to, because there was someone here, like an ancestor, telling me like, do this, right? And I think the people that I surround myself oftentimes connect with their ancestors. There is a series out there somewhere floating around that that my friend Bus Stop actually helped me with, and it says I asked my ancestors to send me true love or love, and they showed me that my truest love is myself. And people laughed at it, and there was one about like limpia tu cuarto, right? And people laughed at it, and they're like, dude, that's so funny. I never thought, because I feel like when we talk about our ancestors, it's always so serious. And I was like, our ancestors weren't like dead serious. They were funny.
Yeah.
And I think it shows in like the roasting of like siblings roasting each other, or parents even roasting us, kind of like keeping us humbled. And I think our ancestors do that all the time. When something happens, or like when you overseason something, they're like, para que aprendas, like echando a perder se aprende type of thing, right? And I think that at first it wasn't on purpose. And then when I started to see what was coming out of the prints that I was doing and the cards, I was like, dang, like this really speaks to people. But I did it for myself though, because I was asking for the help. I was asking the ancestors for the help, like guide me through this. Like I'm going through a really hard time. Can you guide me? And that's the response that I got. And seeing people connect to them, I'm like, okay, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
So it's been fun.
Yeah, no, it's a good way to kind of, kick back that memory too of things that you've been through, but you forget, because, something that I've kind of been trying to be more aware of is just of the now. And the unfortunate part that even if you focus on the now, like even if I say I'm going to remember this day being in front of you here, 20, 30 years from now, out of this whole hour, I'm going to remember like a second of this, but it's that how it made you feel that I think you remember for the most part, or brings that back. It's like when you smell something on the street, you're like, wait, I smelled that when I was like 3 years old or something, But I think like one of the things that I personally should work on is documenting just some parts of my parents, like me personally, I can say, and it sucks to say, that I don't ever think I've taken the time to sit down and talk with them about them, like just where they came from, how they viewed life and or anything like that. It's always been about how I view things, and that's what matters, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think we I at least don't give myself the opportunity to learn more outside of that scope unless I put myself in that position, which I've been struggling to do, but the intentions are there. But I also don't want to wait till it's last minute and, you don't get the chance to do it.
Yeah, I think, and I also think it's on stuff that happens, what's going on currently. I lived, and I'm a metiche. Like, I want to ask the questions. I want to know, like, there's a saying que quiero saber, no me interesa, pero quiero saber. A mí sí me interesa y quiero saber todo. No, but the reason why is because when I was younger, we went through kind of what we're currently going through today right now. My parents were, when they came here in the late 70s, they were able to get residency because of amnesty in 1987 or 86. But there was still fear of being separated from it. So I started asking questions very early on. I was very curious, and I think that's what a lot of us are also lacking, is the curiosity, the imagination. It's part of it. And I started asking my parents questions about, like, when did they leave home? They left home when they were 13, both of them, but they didn't know each other at the time. They went to Tijuana and they started working there, and then they met, at some maquiladora in Tijuana, and then they got married, and then they had my brothers there, and then they decided to come over here. And I remember asking my mom, because I was so curious about people's journey over here. And I started asking people about, like, what do you miss? Or why did you decide to leave? And I asked my mom, was like, what's the one thing you wish you would have brought with you? And she's like, my sewing machine. And I asked my sister-in-law the same question, and she said, my cat. And I kept asking these questions to people, and they were like, oh, like a toy, something so simple, and I'm like, damn, I can't imagine leaving a whole country behind, not even it behind completely, because they brought some of it with them. And then we work at a swami, and I got to meet so many people, and I sell artesanía mexicana with my parents, and we were able to give them like a little piece of home and that reconnection, of it. And I think that's where I get my inspiration from the cards as well, is like being able to connect with something that we already had. It's not old. It's not a new concept. It's something that we carry with ourselves, because we speak in dichos, And I was like, I have to put this somewhere. And I love words, and I love calligraphy, and I love typography. And I learned a new skill in carving, and I was like, I get to put it in cards. It was a process of like trying to figure it out. Right. But my goal always was not tugging at the heart on purpose, but letting them know that they were home, that this is home as well. So that's always been my goal with my poetry, with the work that I do, and the printing that I do.
Yeah, that's beautiful there, because again, at the end of the day, like you said, you're just giving them something that they've already had, just a representation of that home,
Yeah.
And I think that can do like so much benefit to somebody's just health, because sometimes it's easy to feel alone, especially like you said, if you take the trek to go and start over in this fresh new spot, and everything that you knew has been removed away from you, like, you're gonna be in some sort of shock, first of all, and then that isolation, the society's against you, depending on what the narrative is during what decade you're in, like all these things just kind of like back to back. One thing that kind of just reminded me of just kind of relating to what's going on now is back maybe like in maybe 2003, 2004, I was like 12 or 13. I had gone to Mexico because my abuelita had passed away, and my mom hadn't seen her since maybe like 88. So it was almost maybe 12, 13 years as I've been born. We went, but she didn't have papeles. So she took the chance. She flew out to Mexico because she wanted at least to be there for her mom's funeral. And on the way back, after being out there for 2 weeks, she was hoping that they let her through the border. They didn't let her through. She just came up to me in the car. I was with some rando in the car. And then she's like, well, he's going to take you to his house in San Diego. They're not letting me through. So I just remember that like what? Like, why is my mom not coming with me? And I remember just feeling cold, nervous, and like I was being ripped away from my mom, with some stranger. And I remember going to the house, and I think I mentioned this story before on the podcast, but I was there for 2-3 days, and those 2 nights that I was there, I was crying all at night, like for my mom. I feel like a baby, but I was technically I'm a baby. But and a couple months later, she ended up coming back through some like source like magic or something.
Yeah,
sorcery.
magic.
But it just kind of it tugs at those emotions because you can relate to just what people are going through. I think if you're really empathetic about it, or I guess people can be taught empathy and stuff, but at the end of the day, like you have to write the stories that you've lived as well.
Yeah. And those are important. I think you sharing your story, somebody out there is going to connect with it. And I think a lot of us do connect with it. And that's something that, we teach our students and people that that have come to the workshops, any of the workshops that I've done is you have to share your story no matter how small or how big it is, because you don't know who's going to connect with it. It's important for us to record these stories. It's important for us to share these experiences because somebody else is going through it and they don't know that they're going through it. They're in somewhere in silent, like don't talk about it, because that's who we are. We don't always talk about these things, and I think the reason why things are turning out the way they're turning out with everything that's happening is because we started to inform each other about certain things. We started to make plans. We started to just in case this happens, this is what we need to do.
Yeah.
This is how we're going to come back to each other. And I think that's been the most beautiful thing that has happened since this administration has come in. And at first I was like, damn, like we have to live through this again. And that's what my mom told me with the same thing, like we have to live this nightmare again. I was like, we got through it once. We could get through it again, but now we know what to do.
Exactly.
And I think that's what's been keeping the community spirit up. And that's why we have been able to create. I think some of the stuff that I've been doing recently has been more like my inner child stuff. So like I've been carving like the Ninja Turtles and Snoopy and Garfield because I think I'm going back to what happened the first time, like in 1994, and I was a kid. And so I was like, oh, I'm trying to take care of little Xitlalic, but also just reassuring people that we're going to be good. Yeah.
Damn, that one hit me. You got to be there. You got to show up for yourself too,
Yeah. And if I'm able to do that for myself, I'm able to do that for my community as well, and one of the things that I do and one of the workshops that I do is like, I give people stickers and people are like, oh my God, stickers, because it heals the inner child, but it's because there's a part of us that holds on to that little person, to little us, right? And then also teenage us, right? So it's a process. It's a process.
Yeah, no, I totally feel what you're saying about that. About there's this always part that we, I think back when I was in middle school, that feels like nothing to me, But now I'm a grown ass adult already, with kids, and I'm just like, dang, like really, it went by that fast. But yeah, you said like you got to take care of yourself, because I think before you attempt to take care of your community, it has to start internally. And I know some people may interpret it as a selfish thing, like, oh, well, you got to focus. No, that's not what it is. It's like you really got to do that healing inside yourself and really come to terms with the acceptance of who you've become and who you were.
Yeah.
So you know where you're going, and then you can multiply that outside of yourself.
Yeah.
Man, it's a trip. Now, for you, like, just like this podcast is a time capsule for myself at this time of my life. Like, how do you feel about your work? Like when you look back at it and you're like, have I grown or am I the same?
Yeah. We did, my friend, she's an amazing human being. She's from Santa Ana. Her name is Sarah Rafael Garcia. She is the owner of Libro Móvil, and she also runs a gallery called Creat Studios in Santa Ana. And she invited me to do an exhibit there. And it made me, she saw it in a way that I kept seeing it in my head. And I got to see me 10 years ago in my work. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe it. Like, she captured it so awesome. And then I went through some stuff a few years ago, and then she interpreted it in the way that I had interpreted. I just took my stuff to her studio, to her gallery, and she created something really beautiful. And on the top of this hanging, there was a bunch of old cards, prints that I never sold because I thought they were ugly, and they look so amazing up there. And one of the things I was taught by other printers is never throw away any of your old stuff because you could use it for other things to make new art. And I got to do that exhibit, and it was a celebration of 10 years, a decade of creation.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw how much I've grown, how confident I became in my work. And also like the influences that I've had, from the community, from other artists, from music, right? And even people in my life that have been in and out of my life, right? People that I loved and broke my heart and friends that have, loved and broke my heart as well. But everything is an inspiration. And that's what I realized there. And I have grown a lot as an artist where now I'm a lot more confident because now I get to teach it. And you have to be confident. You have to have authority to teach, because if you don't have this experience, how are you going to teach it? But I've become very confident, so it's been awesome. I love it. I'm like, voy a hacer esto y lo hago, but it does take a while to like figure out what I want to do, when it comes to a piece or a poem. Even before I would like write every day, and I'll just write a poem and let me share with you what I wrote. Now I'm like, no, I gotta think about it. Like, ¿qué palabra voy a usar hoy?
Now, stepping into the role of a mentor, right? Like at this point, how do you approach the idea of taking your experiences and providing it to, the youth in this case? Because I know when you really think about it, even when we were kids, a lot of the things that we were told we'll kind of like brush off, we'll leave it to the side because they didn't really mind us. But now we're like, hey, look, I already went through this. Let me help you out. I have some wisdom for you. And it's harder for them at the same time because they're in that same position that we were in. So like, my thing is like, how can we make an impact in the youth without it making them sound preachy, like we're those grown adults,
I know. I hate preachy adults.
As an adult.
And my age, when I was your age, we share stories with the youth about our experiences. And I've learned that they love to hear stories, especially embarrassing ones. They're like, really, miss? You did that? I'm like, yeah, I did that. But also just talking to them like they're your equals, because they are our equals, We're learning from them. They're learning from us. I'm learning new vocabulary from them all the time. And, but...
Vocabulary?
I'm like,
I started going down the list of the things I've learned. Riz.
I was like, that doesn't sound right. But they're amazing. I do honestly like learn so much from them, but also just talking to them like, oh, what about if you try this? Inviting them, and this is what I've learned from my coworker, bus stop. And I'm bringing him up a lot because I need to give him credit, because he's taught me to teach. He's taught me to be patient, and he's taught me to listen to the youth, right? And he's been doing this way longer than I have. And really just, I feel like when I go in there with that energy, and the kids love it because they're like, oh my God, miss. But we're also letting them know, hey, I'm teaching you the skill that I've known for a long time, and I think it's going to be beneficial for you. Let's have fun with it. And I think when we do that invitation, instead of like forcing something on them, it's a lot easier, and they're willing to listen. But we also have to kind of speak their language. And there's some times where they're like, try to roast us, and we're like, are you ready? ¿Vas a aguantar? They're like, oh, yeah, I think I will. But we're just letting them know, like, hey, we've been doing this a long time, longer than you have. You're just used to it. But they're awesome. And again, it's talking to them like you're their tia or their tío. And I think they appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that because a couple of weeks ago, what was it? 1 or 2 weeks ago, there was a student protest in Cela. They met up right there in Southgate in the Azalea. And I went out there and I just recorded some videos. And I was able to interview a couple of the students there. And then I think they felt good about being acknowledged that for what they were doing. Like I didn't put them on the spot, but I asked them like, why are you here? Like, who are you here for? And I think being asked that in that setting allows them to like critically think about why they're there. And some of them are embarrassed, like, no, he wants to do it. And I'm like, hey, come on. So one of you guys has to be down. Yeah. Come on. You guys cannot be looking tough here. Not one of you guys wants to speak on how you feel about the situation, you know? But once you got one of them, they started opening up and they started like fully aware humans, you know? Like they're not even adults, like just a fully aware human that's able to critically think about why they're there. And, you know, once I posted the video, people were commenting on it and they were like, man, these kids are lazy. Like, you know, just talking smack about the kids. And I'm like, you guys are grown as adults and you're talking about these little kids, you know? Like, oh, they should go to school and do better there, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, it's like, you're allowing them to be surrounded by this energy, right? Like, sure, some of them may not feel that specific way about it. They're just out of school. But you're still putting them in the position where they're going to be curious about what's going on. Yeah. And that's going to, at least in one way or another, help them connect the dots. Yeah. And just say, hey, you know what? Like, why am I here? Like, you know? And I don't know. It was just beautiful seeing them express themselves in the way they were. And just to acknowledge what they were doing and make them feel proud about it too. Yeah. Because I think that's key to that. Because you make them feel validated. Yeah. Yeah. And that part, you know, making them feel validated because they're in this too. They're being affected. And I think adults tend to forget that because we're so busy working or, you know, we have families and we're worried and we don't want our kids to get hurt either. But, como se dice, at the same time, we have to let them express themselves because they could be doing something far worse, you know? Yeah. And that's nothing. A lot of these kids that went out there really were doing it for their parents, you know, because they're scared as well. You know, what's going to happen to their families, right? Yeah. A lot of these kids are, you know, come from mixed status families or, you know, both of their parents are undocumented. So, or they themselves are, you know, so it's important for them to not only be heard. And I think a lot of times because of the way media is portraying, and I'm saying media because media has a huge influence on how we see people, how they're calling us, the names that they're calling us, right? And that's one of the things that we spoke to our students about, like, check out, you know, make sure you're aware of the wordage that's being used, you know. Are they using undocumented or illegal? Are they using this name or that name? Like, we kind of went through the history of it as well and how many times it's happened in the past. Yeah. And I was like, this is not the first time that we've been through this, y'all. Like, they've been trying to blame us for something. So it's cool to see the students go out there, you know, and I've gotten to see that happen. I have never been a student. I mean, I've gone to protests. I've gone to marches. I've, you know, I was an activist when I was younger and I was an organizer. But to be a student and be able to protest for my family, I never got to do. Yeah. But my brothers did. You know, I think they did. I'm sure they did. We'll ask them later.
I was like, ¿qué lo hicieron? But I know I would have. And they were very like, you know, be careful. And, you know, you're putting yourself at risk. And we are. But it's worth it. You know? I feel like it is. And yeah. Sure.
No, I agree. I mean, I did have the opportunity back in 2006. I think there was like the big walkouts around here. I was about high school at the time. But yeah, I was able to walk out. Again, I was one of those kids that I was like, okay, I kind of know what's going on. But then just being in that energy, you're like, wait a second, this is huge. Like, this is bigger than life, you know? Yes. And, you know, fast forward now, you know, to the one I went to 2 weeks ago, my 12-year-old, he was like, Dad, we're walking out. Like, I'm going to go with them. And I was like, just be careful. Yeah. Like, because I know what that was like. And I know what it did to me in the more critical aspect of things. You know, I was like, okay, it kind of woke me up. But yeah, no, it's one of those crazy things that I think we need to be, we got to remember, you know, because, you know, we get older, we start separating ourselves from what we were. And then we start becoming this grumpy, you know, like.
My dad. My grumpy dad. That's when I know he's okay. No, yeah, it's true. I think, you know, and you know, when I was your age type of thing, I actually had a conversation with a friend about that, you know, like that, you know, we could go around and say that. And sometimes I say it jokingly with the students and they'll like roast me back. They're like, Miss, in your age, you know, dinosaurs exist. And I'm like, tampoco. But I do feel that, you know, and I also try to understand like my parents, like there's some, you know, generations and my brothers as well with their kids. And I'm like, well, you know, they have to learn. We did.
Yeah.
You know, so to give them the opportunity to do that.
Now, we still got a couple minutes, but I did want to, you know, sprinkle in some poetry there, if possible.
God.
Just a live performance here on the Social Primate.
All right. So this is for my nephew. I hope he's listening. I told him about it, you know. It's called Generation Ketchup. And I wrote it for him when he said he moved in with us. When he moved in with us. It's called Generation Ketchup. What do you mean there's no ketchup? The dismay in my nephew's eyes said everything, and it only made me want to laugh out loud as I offered him some salsa that my Madre Santa had made the night before for dinner. How am I supposed to eat my eggs? His eyes nearly popped out of their socket. There's salsa right here, kid. I pointed to the glass dish that held the concoction my mother so diligently made, roasting chile de árbol inside the house like we all needed our sinuses drained. It has tomatoes and garlic and salt and chile. It's like ketchup, but with the kick. Here stood my nephew in disbelief, asking the most simple question known to a first-generation slash immigrant household. Why don't you all have ketchup in the house? There's never any ketchup. Dear second-generation Mexican, you have entered the realm of stuff that should be in an American household but isn't quite American because migration is still real here. Our roots are still over there, and they only just started with me, your first-generation tia, and you, first and second-generation nephew. See, ketchup when I was younger was a distant concept. There were some, but it wasn't a necessity like it is with you. We only would get it when we were well-behaved and we were treated to the magic that used to be McDonald's. And your grandmother would take the extra ketchup packets home. Same with mustard. That yellow stuff was never even recognized until I was about 10 years old. And I was given mustard flour that tasted divine. Yes, I said divine. But ketchup, as I quickly learned, was nothing but rotten tomatoes, smashed together with vinegar and maybe some sugar. Ketchup was not a veggie either, so it didn't make its way to our house. There was only a few times ketchup was acceptable. With cóctel de camarón, con papa frita, cuando visitas la tía gringa that has been living in Highland Park since the late 60s. Ketchup is pa los gringos, nephew. We had salsa and tapatio. We had chili peppers of all sorts of colors. Yeah.
That poem to me was kind of like those equivalent of ASMR with the sounds or the sounds, the words that you mentioned with the chile and just imagining that. My suegra was a few days ago. She was making some salsa, and everybody in the house is coughing. Like, it's like, oh man, I gotta open up the window.
That was us this morning. Estaba recalentando un tamal that our friends made for us. And they had rajas con chile, and it was so spicy. I was like, why do y'all like to suffer when you eat, man? Everybody was coughing at home. I was like, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I know I mentioned, you know, she was cooking, but my 10-month-old was already coughing. So he was already getting his first dose of the chile.
Start him young. I'm just kidding.
Nah, you know, it's awesome that a lot of the work that you've created, it kind of speaks against what you mentioned earlier about like the narrative that the media puts out, right? Mm-hmm. And I like to say that your work related and also related to other people's work that I've had on the podcast, like it feels like it's all kind of part of like an act of resistance against that too, you know, because people may be kind of like looking down on us or whatever, but at the same time, we still seek to create, right? Just to kind of, you know, just again, going back to what I mentioned earlier, just shining the light on the good aspects of this kind of stuff that we relate to. And I think it's beautiful that we all can relate through that.
Mm-hmm. I think, you know, my goal, I mean, I have a lot of goals, I think. But one of the things that I love to do is uplift the communities that we belong to, and this being Sela. Because Sela is like kind of forgotten almost. And I hate saying that because I think Sela is now making a name for itself. All the communities are coming together, not politically, but the community itself is coming together. And one of the things that I've done is I created these stamps with Sela landmarks. And I started about maybe 2 years ago. And people were like, oh my God, Karihe, oh my God, Belle, oh my God, Maywood. And I still find it hard to like connect with Maywood is so small, right? And the only thing I could think of is like why people can recognize Maywood because of Quintaco, because we're the only Maywood Quintaco is the only one that serves the wet burrito. And I'm like, really? That's not what Maywood is known for. Like, think of, Sleepy Lagoon or something. I don't know. It has more history than that. But those are landmarks that people go to and connect with, right? So, there's like Jim Burgers, everybody, like, that's one is in Balliol. I'm just saying.
Reals.
People in Boyle Heights say it's the one in Soto. It's okay. No, I'm just kidding. It's awesome. All Jim's Burgers are awesome. So, and then Chris's Burgers and Tam's, and I feel like I said, food is always like a landmark. But also like certain streets, and a lot of people want to leave the neighborhood, which is, I understand. But if you've learned something, come back and teach us and come back and help. Yeah. If you think our communities are so bad. And I think the people that are here, now in Sela have been doing that, uplifting the community with art, with information, with celebrating it, and I think spaces like Alivio, spaces like State Gallery, Southgate Museum, Art Space HP, ¿qué más? Crucitas. Oh my God, Crucitas. What's up, Crucitas? I didn't tell Selena about this outside. But Crucitas has been a staple for 10 years, this was a concept, and I wonder, they wondered, and we wondered if they were going to be there for over a year, and now that it's been 10 years. They just celebrated 10 years, So I love that we've gotten to grow together. They were actually the first place that supported my card business, so that you were able to find them there. But I feel like we've been able to create stuff like that because we're so proud of where we come from, and because it's a beautiful community. Because we also have beautiful moments, and poetry should be written about our communities, and art should be made about our communities, I think we get to see it in Boyle Heights, we get to see it in East LA, we get to see it in San Diego, in San Antonio. I want to see it in Sela, and that's what we've been striving to do for the past 20 years, I mean, we've been doing the work for a long time. It's just, we've been a little more quiet, and now we're becoming more vocal about it.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because when Crucitas started, I was doing another podcast before this, Social Primate, and that was 10 years ago when she had just opened. I think it was the first couple of months of Crucitas. I interviewed Selena for the old podcast. So I saw her recently at Alivio, the last one.
Oh, okay.
So she was telling me, we're going to have 10 years in February. And I was like, oh, what? It's already been 10 years? But it speaks volumes, because in those 10 years, I mean, when you say 10 years, it does sound like a lot. But in that time span, so much has happened. I've seen movements. We had the Sela Arts Festival. Now we have the Cultural Center upcoming. Fingers crossed. It's just amazing to see, although it has taken a while, the progress has been steady, and that's what you want. You want the consistency and that momentum to continue.
Yeah, I hope that people, I know it's hard and it's a long time coming. I hope people are able to be around for it, because people do get tired of waiting, for stuff to happen. And I'm like, just be patient. It's going to happen. But, in the meantime, let's create these spaces.
Yeah.
Which are important for our communities, we need it. We're thirsty for them. That's why Sela Arts Festival was so huge, because we hadn't seen anything like that before, So I know you were a part of it. You got all kinds of people there.
Yeah, we had a booth.
¿Qué estás haciendo? Estás causando tráfico.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, there was people just blocking the thing. The thing. Yeah. But yeah, it was honestly a beautiful experience. Just to be there again, just as somebody who's been in Sela for a long time too. At some point I didn't have the best. I wouldn't say the nicest things of Southeast LA when I was younger. But now I've learned, and I think that's what happens. Through the hardships, through the struggles, you start appreciating the good things about it and how and what you want to see it to become.
Exactly.
And I think that's when that true passion starts kicking in, where you start realizing, okay, it's not, you're aware that it's not the best place, but you can make it.
Yeah.
And there's other like-minded people in your community that want to see this place grow.
Yeah, that's the beautiful part, is that, I've gotten to meet people and I'm like, dude, well, you're telling me I've been saying it for the past 20 years.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that that's still happening, because maybe I didn't know how to do this. So, okay, let's team up and let's collaborate and see how we could create the change. And then it happens. Mm-hmm. And I think that's awesome.
Yeah. Before we start wrapping this up, we can still sneak in a few more poems here, if that's okay with you.
A ver.
Let's see what we got.
Para que sepan, no. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to do this one. This one seems to be the favorite. Okay, this one. This one was actually inspired by Oscar's photography.
Hey.
The stuff that he documents with the Virgencitas. And it was a collaboration that we did together at Espacio 1839. It's called Lupita. I don't know what Lupita thinks about chisme, but I'm sure she's heard a lot of it in the form of prayers. I know she's seen it all, but I also know she's held so many with love, so many pleading to get covered with her star-studded manta. Does she even consider it chisme? Does she understand that sometimes after a long day, all we want to do is vent? Does she mind that all we do is ask for guidance? Does she get tired of us asking her to protect us? Is she always so giving? Is she giving even to those that don't believe in her? Does she want all girls to be like her, or does she want to be like us here and now? I don't want her to think she has to do all this work for us to believe in her. I believe in her like she believes in us. You are doing amazing, Lupita.
Yay. Quick shout out to Oscar. He has a project, La Virgencita, on Instagram.
La Virgencita, is it Ellen? Sorry, Oscar.
_ La Virgencita.
Yeah, there you go. See?
Yeah, and that's just for people listening, that's a collection of different Virgencitas found across Los Angeles, if I'm correct.
Yes. We did a show at Espacio. We had been wanting to collaborate for some time, and he went to my first official solo show, because my first solo show was at Crucitas, and the second one that I did was at Espacio, and he saw it and he was like, okay, I'm ready. And I was like, yes. And so I was like, well, what images do you want to show? Let me write some poems for them. And it was awesome. People really liked it, and I wasn't surprised because his work is amazing. But it was really cool to see what came out of it. So
yeah. No, I think it's awesome. Again, that we have to continue networking with each other and collaborating. I think that's how we're gonna recognize each other, because sometimes you read books or stories about local people and you're like, oh man, I wonder how they were like. But where are those people right now?
Yeah, exactly.
So we have to continue connecting and just helping other people see the value of these places that we live in.
Yeah.
Is there another one that we can play before we end this off with some music?
Okay, I'm gonna do this one. Short and sweet. It's also one that was inspired by Oscar's work. In this poem, there's a prayer, the kind that is born out of love, out of heartbreak, out of memory, on our way to work, to the market, to life. In this poem, there is a prayer to Lupita, Guadalupe, Cualtexope, Cualtique, Tonantzin. Divine Mother, hold us in time of love, fear, and acceptance. Show us to be patient like you. Show us not to give up on ourselves. That who we pray for will see the light. That they will remember where they come from. That we will remember where we come from. In this poem, there is a prayer as a reminder as we see Lupita guiding us home after a long day, to remind us that we are okay, almost home. Murals as maps to remind us not to forget. In this poem, there is a prayer, the same that so many have repeated time and time again. Divine Mother, bless are you among so many, and bless all of us with your love. Remind us that among all the bad, there is still some good here. Remind us on our way to life that we will still be here, that our stories will always be here.
Thank you so much for taking the time, Sally. I appreciate everything that you've created up until this point. And again, I'm glad that I've been able to share the spaces like that. And I hope we continue to to do that moving forward, at least for sure in Southeast LA.
Of course. Yes, aquí I'm down to collaborate anytime.
Yeah. For people to find out more about your work, stay updated with your work, where can they go?
They could go to Tarjetitas con Amor, XGO, or they could go to my personal account because I always post everything. And Chisme. And ¿cómo se llama? Sorry. At Xitlalic, it's Xitlalic. It's just my name. I was one of the lucky ones. I was able to get their name on Instagram. So you can follow me there.
Awesome. Thank you so much again for making the time. Everybody else, we'll see you next week. You're listening to KQBHLP, Los Angeles, California, 101.5 FM. And we're going to leave you with some music of the Sinseers with It Was Only a Dream.